Tonight, we are settling into one of the oldest and strangest mysteries in the wizarding world, the hidden truth about house elves and the 1,000 years of servitude that shaped their history. As the castle grows quiet and the candles burn low, you can simply listen and drift along through forgotten corridors of magical history. If you have spent many evenings wandering these stories together, you might leave a note about which night brought you here. And if this is your first journey into the lore, you can think of it as night one beside the fire. Either way, allow the noise of the day to fade behind you as we descend beneath Hogwarts itself to a place most students never see and few ever truly understand. Far below the great hall, beneath stone floors, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, the kitchens of Hogwarts remain awake long after midnight. The last students have returned to their dormitories. The portraits have settled into sleepy conversations. Even the ghosts drift more slowly through the corridors. Yet down here, where enormous copper pots hang above fading embers and stacks of silver serving trays catch the orange glow of dying fires, work continues. Plates are washed, tables are prepared for the following morning, fresh bread is set aside. The castle seems asleep, but invisible hands still move through the darkness. For more than 1,000 years, house elves have labored in places like this, their presence so familiar that most witches and wizards rarely stop to question it. And that is where our mystery begins. If wizarding history records the rise of Merlin, the founding of Hogwarts around the 10th century, the Goblin Rebellions, the International Statute of Secrecy in 1692, and countless ministers, headmasters, and dark wizards, why does it say almost nothing about the origins of house elves? The silence is striking once you notice it. Wizards know where goblins come from. They know where giants once lived. They have entire departments dedicated to the regulation of magical creatures. Yet when it comes to house elves, one of the most widespread magical beings in Britain, the historical record becomes strangely thin. The elves are simply there, already serving, already bound, already woven into wizarding society so completely that their beginning seems lost. When Harry Potter first encounters house elves in 1992, he meets Dobby, servant of the Malfoy family. Dobby arrives uninvited in Harry's bedroom at number 4 Privet Drive, dressed in a filthy old pillowcase. His ears resemble those of a bat. His eyes are enormous and green. Before Harry has any opportunity to understand him, Dobby demonstrates something remarkable. He can appear and disappear at will. He can punish himself magically. He can manipulate objects without a wand. Everything about him suggests a magical system operating beside wizard magic rather than beneath it. Yet even then, Harry does not ask where house elves came from. Almost nobody does. The deeper you look into the books, the stranger the omission becomes. Hogwarts itself employs more than 100 house elves during Harry's years at school. They prepare thousands of meals every week. They maintain one of the largest magical castles in Europe. They keep common rooms supplied. They clean corridors stretching across 7 floors. During Harry's 4th year, when he visits the kitchens with Fred and George Weasley, he discovers a bustling underground world filled with elves rushing between ovens and tables. None of them seem surprised by their work. None of them question it. The arrangement appears ancient, accepted, permanent. Yet permanence is often an illusion in wizarding history. Hogwarts was founded by four individuals: Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin. The castle did not simply appear. Every tradition within it began somewhere. The Sorting Hat was created by the founders. The Chamber of Secrets was built by Slytherin. Even Peeves the Poltergeist emerged at a particular moment in the school's early life. So where do the House Elves fit into this timeline? Were they present from the first day construction began? Did Helga Hufflepuff recruit them to help maintain the castle, or did they arrive later after centuries of wizarding expansion? Canon never answers directly, and that absence has fueled speculation among readers for decades. Popular fan theory suggests that House Elves once existed as an independent magical people before becoming attached to wizarding households. The theory is not canon, but it emerges from a real inconsistency. Throughout the series, elves demonstrate intelligence, memory, loyalty, emotional depth, and powerful magic. They are not beasts. They are not enchanted tools. They possess individual personalities as distinct as any human character. Dobby dreams of freedom. Winky clings desperately to tradition. Creature carries decades of resentment and grief. Such complexity makes it difficult to imagine them originating merely as servants. Something older seems to linger beneath the surface. The clues become even more intriguing when you consider how different elf magic is from wizard magic. Witches and wizards rely heavily upon wands. Students spend 7 years learning spells, wand movements, and incantations. Yet house elves perform extraordinary feats instinctively. Dobby can levitate Aunt Petunia's pudding in the summer of 1992. He can magically seal the barrier to platform 9 3/4. He can appear inside Hogwarts despite enchantments that restrict ordinary apparition. These are not minor tricks. They are acts of sophisticated magic. The wizarding world notices them, yet rarely pauses to examine what they imply. In fact, there are moments when elf magic appears to bypass rules that constrain even the greatest wizards. Albus Dumbledore, perhaps the most accomplished wizard of his age, spends years uncovering Voldemort's secrets. Voldemort himself constructs elaborate magical protections around his Horcruxes. Both men understand magic at extraordinary levels, yet later events will reveal that neither wizard fully appreciates the capabilities of House Elves. The gap is important. It suggests that elf magic did not evolve as a lesser version of wizard magic. It follows its own traditions, its own laws, and perhaps its own ancient history. The question grows larger the longer you sit with it. If house elves possess unique magical abilities, why did wizarding society never elevate them to positions of authority? Goblins control Gringotts, Wizarding Bank. Centaurs maintain their own communities and fiercely guard their independence. Even ghosts occupy a recognized place in wizarding culture. House elves alone seem trapped within a role that denies the significance of their abilities. They cook, they clean, they serve. The contradiction sits quietly beneath the surface of every Hogwarts feast. Hundreds of students admire mountains of food appearing magically on golden plates, while almost none of them think about the workers hidden below. Perhaps that blindness is exactly what makes the mystery endure. The greatest secrets are not always concealed behind locked doors or hidden chambers. Sometimes they survive because everyone stops looking. Generation after generation of witches and wizards inherited house elves the way they inherited family heirlooms, ancient estates, and old traditions. Few asked whether the arrangement had a beginning. Fewer still wondered whether the official story was incomplete. The elves remained in kitchens, laundries, cellars, and manor houses, carrying centuries of memory that nobody thought to record. And so, as the fires in the Hogwarts kitchen settle into glowing beds of red ash, the unanswered question remains hanging in the darkness. Long before Harry Potter received his Hogwarts letter, long before Voldemort rose to power, long before the founders raised stone walls above the Scottish Highlands, house elves were already there serving unseen. The records tell us almost nothing about how their story began. Yet the silence itself feels meaningful. Because when an entire civilization forgets to ask where something came from, that forgotten origin often becomes the most fascinating mystery of all. Why can a supposedly subordinate magical species accomplish feats that many fully trained wizards cannot? The question becomes impossible to ignore. Once you begin collecting the evidence scattered throughout the series, most readers remember Dobby as the nervous elf who wore a pillowcase and spoke in frantic bursts of self-criticism. Yet beneath that appearance stood a magical being capable of violating assumptions that even the Ministry of Magic accepted as fact. In the summer of 1992, Dobby enters number 4, Privet Drive without difficulty. He performs wandless magic repeatedly. He manipulates objects at a distance, and he does all of this without years of formal magical education. The contrast between appearance and ability sits at the heart of the mystery. The first clear demonstration comes with Aunt Petunia's pudding. While Harry desperately tries to survive a disastrous dinner involving Vernon Dursley and the wealthy Masons, Dobby levitates the elaborate dessert high into the air before dropping it directly onto Mrs. Mason's head. The Ministry immediately detects underage magic at Harry's location and sends an official warning. What is fascinating is not merely the prank itself. The spell is precise. The levitation is sustained. The timing is perfect. Dobby performs a complex magical action inside a Muggle residence and leaves the Ministry convinced Harry was responsible. For a creature commonly treated as a servant, it is a remarkably sophisticated display. Only weeks later, Dobby interferes with Harry's journey back to Hogwarts in an even more dramatic way. At King's Cross Station, Harry and Ron attempt to pass through the barrier separating platforms 9 and 10 from platform 9 and 3/4. Instead, they collide painfully with solid metal. Dobby later reveals that he sealed the magical entrance. The consequences nearly become catastrophic. Harry and Ron are forced to fly Arthur Weasley's enchanted Ford Anglia to school. What matters here is the scale of the act. Dobby temporarily disrupts an access point used by countless witches and wizards. He alters a piece of established magical infrastructure. Few readers stop to consider how extraordinary that really is. As Harry's years at Hogwarts continue, more examples quietly accumulate. During the events of Chamber of Secrets, Dobby repeatedly appears inside Hogwarts despite the castle's extensive magical protections. Students cannot apparate there. Adult wizards cannot simply appear within its walls. The restrictions are explained directly during lessons and reinforced throughout the series. Yet house elves move in and out of the castle with apparent ease. The explanation arrives much later when Hermione Granger finally recognizes a truth that wizarding society has largely ignored. Elf magic operates according to different rules. Those different rules become impossible to dismiss during the Second Wizarding War. In Deathly Hallows, Harry, Ron, and Hermione are imprisoned within the cellar of Malfoy Manor. Bellatrix Lestrange is present. Lucius Malfoy is present. Narcissa Malfoy is present. Several dangerous Death Eaters occupy the house. The prisoners appear trapped beyond hope. Then Dobby arrives. He apparates directly into the manor. He disarms enemies. He rescues prisoners. He escapes with multiple passengers. The feat is so remarkable that it transforms the entire course of the story. Harry survives because house elf magic reaches places wizard magic struggles to penetrate. Yet Dobby is not the only example. The case of Kreacher reveals something even more significant. Years before Harry learns the truth, Lord Voldemort borrows Kreacher from Regulus Black to assist with a secret mission. Voldemort travels to a remote cave along the coast, a place protected by powerful enchantments and hidden from ordinary discovery. There he places Salazar Slytherin's locket, Horcrux, inside a basin filled with a devastating potion. After forcing Kreacher to drink the potion, Voldemort leaves him behind to die. The Dark Lord assumes the problem is solved. He believes no servant could escape. He is wrong. When Kreacher later recounts the event, the details reveal one of Voldemort's greatest blind spots. Regulus had ordered Kreacher to return home after helping the Dark Lord. Bound by that command, Kreacher apparates away from the cave, despite obstacles that should have made escape impossible. He survives. He returns to Grimmauld Place. And for years, Voldemort remains completely unaware that a witness exists. The most feared dark wizard in history, a man obsessed with mastering every branch of magic, overlooks a possibility because he does not understand house elves. His arrogance blinds him. The irony is profound. Voldemort spends decades pursuing forbidden knowledge. He studies Horcruxes. He explores ancient magic. He seeks immortality itself. Yet he dismisses entire categories of beings as insignificant. House elves fall into that category. So do goblins. So do many creatures classified by the Ministry as lesser beings. Throughout the series, his failures repeatedly emerge from that prejudice. He understands domination. He does not understand loyalty. He understands fear. He does not understand devotion. And because he never takes house elves seriously, one of his most important secrets survives. Even Albus Dumbledore notices the pattern. During Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore tells Harry that Voldemort has never valued the magical abilities of creatures he considers beneath him. It is a subtle observation, easy to overlook during a conversation focused on Horcruxes, yet the statement helps explain much of what follows. Dumbledore recognizes something that Voldemort cannot. The wizarding world contains forms of power that do not fit neatly into traditional hierarchies. House elves occupy one of those hidden spaces. Their strength remains invisible largely because nobody bothers to measure it. Another revealing moment occurs during Harry's 6th year. After inheriting Grimmauld Place from Sirius Black, Harry becomes Kreacher's legal master. He orders Kreacher to locate Mundungus Fletcher, who has stolen property from the house. The task appears impossible. Mundungus is slippery, experienced, and actively avoiding contact. Yet Kreacher finds him quickly. Within a short time, the elf drags the protesting wizard directly into the kitchen of Grimmauld Place. The scene is almost comedic, but it illustrates something important. House elves possess capabilities and methods that human wizards neither fully understand nor control. The more evidence accumulates, the harder it becomes to accept the common assumption that house elves are weak dependents protected by wizard masters. The opposite interpretation begins to emerge. Their magic is ancient. Their magic is adaptable. In certain circumstances, it surpasses the limitations imposed on wand users. Dobby enters places others cannot enter. Creature escapes places others cannot escape. Hogwarts itself depends daily upon hundreds of elves whose abilities exceed the understanding of many students and professors walking above them. The relationship starts to look less like simple servitude and more like an arrangement sustained by custom, tradition, and belief. And that realization leads naturally to an even stranger question. If house elves possess extraordinary magical abilities, why are they bound at all? Why does an elf capable of crossing enchanted barriers, surviving Voldemort's traps, and performing powerful wandless magic remain tied to a household through the symbolic gift of clothing? The answer lies not in magical strength, but in something far older and far more mysterious. Because the deepest secret of house elves is not how powerful they are. It is the invisible chain that persuades them to serve. Why would an entire magical race regard freedom as something frightening rather than desirable? The question stands at the center of nearly every conversation about house elves. When readers first encounter Dobby, the answer seems obvious. He longs for a release from the Malfoy family. He dreams of choosing his own path. He risks punishment repeatedly in pursuit of that goal. Yet as the series expands, Dobby begins to look less like the representative of his people and more like an extraordinary exception. Most house elves react to the idea of freedom very differently, and that contradiction forces us to look deeper into the strange magical bond that governs their lives. The rules themselves appear deceptively simple. A house elf can be freed if its master presents it with clothing. The gesture sounds almost ceremonial, yet the consequences are absolute. In 1993, at the end of the Chamber of Secrets crisis, Harry Potter exploits this rule brilliantly. After Lucius Malfoy retrieves Tom Riddle's diary from Harry, he tosses the diary toward Dobby. Hidden inside is one of Harry's socks. Dobby catches the object and discovers the clothing. Instantly, the bond is broken. The elf stands free. Lucius realizes what has happened only after it is too late. The scene is remembered fondly because it delivers a satisfying victory over the Malfoys. But beneath the triumph lies an unusual magical principle. House elves are not freed through legal documents. They are not freed through ministry intervention. They are not freed through the payment of wages. Instead, the act revolves around clothing. A sock, a shirt, a garment handed from master to servant. The symbolism is ancient and oddly specific. Rowling never fully explains why clothing carries such power, leaving readers to wonder whether the custom originated in forgotten magical contracts stretching back centuries. Dobby's reaction reveals how profound the change truly is. After gaining freedom, he treats clothing almost as treasure. He collects hats, He wears multiple layers of mismatched garments. Bright socks become a source of pride. During Harry's 4th year, Dobby arrives wearing combinations that would appear ridiculous to most wizards. Tea cozies, colorful socks, scarves, and sweaters piled together with enthusiastic delight. To outsiders, it seems amusing. To Dobby, each piece represents something far more important. Every garment is proof that his life belongs to him. Yet when Hermione Granger begins investigating elf welfare during the Triwizard Tournament, she discovers that Dobby's outlook is unusual. The Hogwarts house elves are horrified by the prospect of liberation. They take pride in serving the school. They do not demand wages. They do not seek independence. When Hermione attempts to free them by hiding knitted hats throughout Gryffindor Tower, many elves become deeply offended. Rather than gratefully accepting her efforts, they refuse to clean the tower altogether. Only Dobby continues the work. The reaction shocks Hermione because it clashes completely with her expectations. The most heartbreaking example arrives through Winky. Once the trusted servant of Bartemius Crouch Sr., Winky dedicates her life to serving the Crouch family. During the Quidditch World Cup of 1994, she is discovered holding Harry's wand shortly after the appearance of the Dark Mark. Though innocent of wrongdoing, she becomes a public embarrassment to her master. Crouch dismisses her. To outside observers, freedom has been granted. To Winky, disaster has struck. She collapses into despair so severe that it reshapes her entire existence. At Hogwarts, Winky's suffering becomes impossible to ignore. She cries constantly. She struggles to perform ordinary tasks. She turns repeatedly to butterbeer, whose alcohol content affects elves much more strongly than humans. Other house elves try to support her, but her grief remains overwhelming. What makes the tragedy so striking is that she continues defending Bartemius Crouch. Even after her dismissal, she speaks of him with loyalty. She worries about his reputation. She longs for the life she lost. The relationship that appears oppressive from Hermione's perspective feels meaningful and irreplaceable from Winky's. This creates one of the most complicated moral questions in the series. Hermione sees injustice and attempts to correct it. Her instincts are compassionate. Her motives are sincere. Yet the people she seeks to help often reject her methods. The tension is not presented as a simple disagreement. Rowling repeatedly places Hermione in situations where her certainty collides with the reality of elf culture. The result is discomfort for everyone involved. Readers are left wrestling with questions that have no easy answers. One possible interpretation is that centuries of servitude reshaped house elf psychology. Another is that magical binding influences their desires directly. Canon never settles the matter. House elves clearly possess free thought. Dobby proves this repeatedly. Creature openly disobeys expectations when his loyalties pull him elsewhere. At the same time, service appears deeply woven into their identity. The line between cultural tradition and magical compulsion remains frustratingly unclear. Certain details suggest that the bond extends beyond ordinary employment. House elves punish themselves when they believe they have failed. Dobby slams his head into walls. He irons his own hands. He attempts to injure himself after speaking critically about the Malfoys. These punishments are not imposed by Lucius standing nearby with a wand. They arise automatically from within the structure governing elf behavior. The effect resembles an invisible law embedded into their existence. Even Dobby struggles against it despite desperately wanting freedom. The mystery becomes even deeper when considering how fiercely some elves attach themselves to family lines. Creature serves the House of Black across generations. He treasures the memories of Sirius's mother, Walburga Black, despite her cruelty. He maintains Grimmauld Place long after many family members are dead. The devotion resembles something beyond simple obedience. The house itself becomes sacred to him. The family history becomes part of his identity. To separate the elf from the household is almost like separating memory from the mind that carries it. And so the strange paradox remains. House elves possess powerful magic. They demonstrate intelligence, individuality, and emotional depth. Yet many willingly embrace a system that outsiders struggle to understand. Dobby sees freedom as a miracle. Winky experiences it as catastrophe. Between those two responses lies a mystery stretching back through generations of wizarding history. Because before we can understand why house elves serve, we must understand the families they served for centuries and the ancient households that built their power upon unseen hands. Were house elves originally servants of powerful wizarding families? Or did powerful wizarding families become powerful because generations of elves quietly sustained them? The question lingers whenever the story enters the great pure-blood houses of Britain. Again and again, the oldest families appear linked to house elves whose service stretches back beyond living memory. The connection is so consistent that it begins to feel less like coincidence and more like a foundational part of wizarding society. Vast ancestral homes, inherited wealth, ancient heirlooms, and loyal elves seem to travel together through the centuries. To understand the history of servitude, we must first walk through the households where that servitude became tradition. No family illustrates this more clearly than the House of Black. Their ancestral home at number 12, Grimmauld Place, stands hidden among ordinary London buildings, concealed by powerful enchantments. By the time Harry first enters the house in 1995, it is dark, dusty, and filled with relics of pure blood pride. The walls display portraits of black ancestors. Cabinets contain dangerous magical objects. Heavy curtains conceal the screaming portrait of Walburga Black. Yet among all these remnants of the past, one figure remains actively maintaining the house. Creature, elderly and bitter, continues serving despite the decline of the family he once knew. Creature's life reveals how deeply house elves become woven into family histories. He remembers Sirius Black as a child. He remembers Regulus Black. He remembers Walburga and Orion Black. Long before Harry Potter was born, Creature was already walking the corridors of Grimmauld Place. He witnessed arguments, celebrations, losses, and secrets that never appeared in official records. In many ways, he functions as a living archive. While portraits preserve faces and names, Creature preserves memories. His knowledge spans decades, perhaps longer than the lives of several human family members combined. What makes this especially fascinating is that Creature's loyalty survives, even when the family itself fractures. Sirius rejects many of the values cherished by his parents. He joins the Order of the Phoenix. He despises the prejudice embedded within Black family traditions. Yet Creature remains emotionally attached to the older generation. He treasures Walburga Black's portrait. He speaks admiringly of pure blood relatives. He clings to customs that Sirius finds repulsive. The result is constant conflict. Master and servant occupy the same house while embodying entirely different visions of what the House of Black should represent. The Malfoy family presents another revealing example. By the time Harry meets Dobby, the elf has already spent years serving Lucius Malfoy, Narcissa Malfoy, and their son Draco at Malfoy Manor. The estate itself is one of the grandest residences in Wizarding Britain. It contains extensive grounds, luxurious rooms, and enough prestige that Voldemort eventually chooses it as a headquarters during the Second Wizarding War. Yet beneath the elegance lies a relationship built upon fear. Dobby describes repeated mistreatment. He punishes himself whenever he speaks critically about his masters. The grandeur of the manor depends in part upon labor that remains invisible to most visitors. There is an irony hidden within the Malfoys' treatment of Dobby. Lucius Malfoy values blood status, lineage, and social hierarchy above almost everything else. He believes deeply in distinctions between magical beings. Yet the household runs smoothly because of a creature he regards as inferior. Meals appear, rooms remain clean, daily life functions efficiently. Dobby performs countless tasks that support the family. The dependence is obvious from the outside, though characters inside the system rarely acknowledge it. The relationship resembles a structure so old that nobody pauses to examine the foundations beneath it. The story of Winky introduces a third influential family, the Crouches. Bartemius Crouch, Sr. occupies one of the most powerful positions in the Ministry of Magic. He serves as head of the Department of International Magical Cooperation and is widely respected for his intelligence and discipline. His public image is immaculate. Yet, within his private life, Winky shoulders responsibilities of enormous significance. She guards secrets. She protects the hidden truth about Barty Crouch Jr. She performs tasks that help maintain one of the most dangerous deceptions in the entire series. Far from being a mere servant, she becomes essential to preserving the family's carefully constructed reality. The Quidditch World Cup offers a glimpse of how much trust these households place in their elves. Crouch leaves Winky responsible for watching over his son beneath an invisibility cloak during one of the largest gatherings in the wizarding world. The assignment is extraordinary. It requires vigilance, loyalty, and absolute discretion. Few human employees would be trusted with information so sensitive, yet Crouch entrusts it to Winky. The decision reveals something important about the relationship between wizarding families and their elves. Beneath the hierarchy exists a level of dependence that often goes unspoken. When viewed together, the Blacks, Malfoys, and Crouches form a pattern. These are not struggling households seeking occasional assistance. They are influential families positioned near the center of British wizarding society. Their wealth spans generations. Their names carry political and social weight, yet each relies heavily upon house elves. The elves cook, clean, organize, protect secrets, maintain estates, and preserve continuity across decades. Human family members are born, grow old, and die. The elves remain. In many cases, they become the most stable presence within the household. This leads to an intriguing possibility. Imagine a pure-blood estate operating without house elves for several centuries. Vast libraries would require maintenance, Generations of magical artifacts would need care. Enormous houses would demand constant attention. Family records would need preservation. The practical burden would be immense. House elves quietly absorb that burden. They become custodians not only of homes but of memory itself. A family's continuity depends partly upon individuals whose names rarely appear in history books. Creature demonstrates this better than anyone. After Sirius's death in 1996, much of the surviving knowledge about Regulus Black exists within Creature's memories. The elf remembers Voldemort borrowing him. He remembers the cave. He remembers Regulus discovering the truth about the Horcrux. Without Creature, Harry would never fully understand Regulus's final actions. A servant preserves the secret that ultimately helps destroy the Dark Lord. The irony is remarkable. One of the most important pieces of information in the war survives because an overlooked house elf remembers what powerful wizards forgot. As the years pass, a curious image emerges from the shadows of wizarding history. Behind ancient surnames and celebrated bloodlines stand figures rarely acknowledged in public. They light fires. They maintain estates. They witness private conversations. They carry family secrets from one generation to the next. The grand houses of Britain appear permanent. Yet permanence requires caretakers. And among all those caretakers, none prove more enduring than the elves. The question is no longer whether powerful families owned house elves. The question is how much of wizarding history was quietly preserved by them. What does Winky's tragedy reveal about the psychological cost of centuries of magical servitude? At first glance, her story appears far smaller than the battles against Voldemort, the Tri-Wizard Tournament, or the mysteries surrounding the Dark Mark. She is not a famous witch. She does not wield a wand. Most students at Hogwarts barely notice her existence. Yet hidden within Winky's downfall is one of the most revealing portraits of house elf life ever presented in the series. Through her, the wizarding world exposes a reality that many characters would rather ignore. The turning point arrives during the Quidditch World Cup in the summer of 1994. Thousands of witches and wizards gather to watch Ireland face Bulgaria. Ludo Bagman oversees the event. Cornelius Fudge attends. Victor Crumb becomes the center of attention for countless spectators. Amid this enormous celebration, Winky sits high in the top box, wearing an unusual garment, clothing given specifically by Bartemius Crouch Sr. She does not want to be there. She is terrified of heights, yet her master orders her to occupy the seat while guarding an invisible figure hidden beneath an invisibility cloak. That figure is Barty Crouch Jr. The situation is already precarious before disaster strikes. Winky spends the match anxious and uncomfortable. Then chaos erupts after the game ends. Death Eaters attack the campsite. Families flee through the darkness. Tents burn. Panic spreads across the grounds. In the confusion, Barty Crouch Jr. escapes Winky's supervision. Shortly afterward, the Dark Mark appears in the sky for the first time since Voldemort's fall. Ministry officials investigate immediately. When they discover Harry Potter's wand near the scene and find Winky nearby, suspicion falls heavily upon her. What follows is deeply revealing. Bartemius Crouch knows Winky did not conjure the Dark Mark. He knows she is innocent. He knows the real danger involves his son, yet he dismisses her publicly anyway. The decision is swift and merciless. Before ministry officials including Amos Diggory, Arthur Weasley, and Cornelius Fudge Crouch frees Winky from service. The dismissal protects his secret but destroys her life. For many witches and wizards present, the event seems almost insignificant. To Winky, it feels like the end of the world. The aftermath unfolds gradually at Hogwarts. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione later encounter Winky in the kitchens, they find an elf transformed by grief. She cries constantly. Her eyes are swollen. Her clothes hang untidily. She speaks of her former master with painful devotion despite everything that happened. The contradiction unsettles Hermione. Winky has been humiliated, discarded, and abandoned, yet she continues defending the man responsible. Her loyalty survives even after the relationship itself has been severed. Butterbeer becomes another important clue. For humans, butterbeer contains only a mild amount of alcohol. Students drink it regularly during visits to Hogsmeade. House elves react differently. Winky becomes intoxicated from repeated consumption, retreating further into sorrow and self-recrimination. The image is surprisingly bleak for a series often associated with magical wonder. Hidden beneath Hogwarts, surrounded by hard-working elves preparing meals and maintaining the castle, Winky slowly unravels. Her suffering is not dramatic. It is quiet, repetitive, and deeply personal. The reactions of the other house elves are equally important. They do not celebrate Winky's freedom. They do not encourage her to embrace independence. Instead, many sympathize with her loss. Their response suggests that her grief is understandable within elf culture. Service is not merely employment, it forms the center of identity. The dismissal strips away purpose, belonging, and structure all at once. To human observers, freedom appears obvious. To many elves, freedom resembles abandonment. Hermione Granger cannot accept that interpretation. During her 4th year, she founds the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare, better known as SPEW. Her outrage is genuine. She sees intelligent beings trapped within an unequal system and wants reform. Winky becomes one of the examples fueling her determination. Yet Rowling carefully complicates the issue. Hermione's compassion is admirable, but her understanding remains incomplete. She recognizes injustice immediately. Understanding the emotional world of the elves proves much harder. The conversations between Hermione and Winky often feel like two people speaking entirely different languages. Hermione talks about rights, wages, and freedom. Winky talks about duty, family, and shame. Neither is lying, neither is acting maliciously, yet they cannot bridge the gap between their assumptions. Hermione views liberation as the solution. Winky experiences liberation as the problem itself. The tension creates one of the most nuanced social conflicts in the series because both perspectives contain genuine truth. A closer look at Winky's history helps explain why. For years, she served the Crouch family. She knew their routines. She protected their secrets. She occupied a defined place within a household whose structure shaped her daily life. Then, in a single public moment, that structure vanished. Human characters experience similar losses throughout the series. Sirius loses his family. Remus Lupin loses his place in society. Harry loses his parents. In each case, identity becomes fractured when a foundational relationship disappears. Winky's suffering follows the same emotional logic, even if the circumstances are unique. There is another detail worth considering. Throughout Goblet of Fire, Winky repeatedly fears disappointing her master. Fear certainly exists within the relationship, Yet affection exists as well. House elves are not portrayed as emotionless victims mechanically following orders. Their attachments are real. Dobby cares deeply about Harry. Creature loves Regulus Black. Winky loves the Crouch family despite everything. Those emotional bonds complicate any attempt to view elf servitude through a single lens. The reality is messier, more human, and therefore more troubling. By the end of the novel, Winky remains in the Hogwarts kitchens, still grieving and still struggling to adapt. The larger story moves on. Voldemort returns. Cedric Diggory dies. The wizarding world enters a new era of fear. Yet Winky's tragedy lingers quietly in the background. Her story forces an uncomfortable question upon anyone examining House Elf history. If freedom causes such pain, what does that reveal about the system that shaped generations of elves before her? And if even a compassionate witch like Hermione struggles to understand the answer, perhaps the problem runs deeper than anyone realized. That realization will soon drive Hermione to attempt something unprecedented. Armed with determination, outrage, and a stack of knitting needles, she will launch a campaign to change the lives of house elves across Hogwarts. What follows will reveal just how wide the gap has become between the ideals of wizard reformers and the beliefs held by the elves themselves. Was Hermione Granger centuries ahead of wizarding society? Or was she misunderstanding the very people she wanted to help? The question follows her throughout much of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Few students at Hogwarts notice the house elves working beneath their feet. Fewer still spend time wondering whether those elves are treated fairly. Hermione, however, cannot let the issue rest. After meeting Winky and witnessing the pain caused by her dismissal, she becomes convinced that the wizarding world has accepted an injustice so old that most people no longer recognize it. What begins as concern soon develops into a campaign. The organization she creates bears a name that many students find amusing: the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare, or SPEW. Hermione takes the project completely seriously. She designs badges, she drafts goals, she recruits members. Her objectives include securing wages for house elves, improving working conditions, and ultimately ending what she views as a system of exploitation. Harry and Ron reluctantly become members, though neither displays much enthusiasm. Their reactions reflect the broader attitude of wizarding society. Most people simply do not regard house elf servitude as a pressing issue. The contrast becomes clear whenever Hermione discusses the subject with classmates. Students who would eagerly debate Quidditch scores or Triwizard champions show little interest in elf rights. Even otherwise kind characters struggle to understand her concern. Ron Weasley, despite possessing a generous heart, has grown up surrounded by assumptions that make the institution seem normal. His family treats magical creatures better than many pureblood households, yet he still regards house elves as naturally suited to service. The idea has been embedded into wizarding culture for generations. Hermione finds herself challenging not merely individual opinions, but an entire worldview. Her strongest evidence comes directly from Hogwarts itself. During Harry's 4th year, the castle employs more than 100 house elves in its kitchens. These elves prepare meals for hundreds of students every day. They maintain dormitories. They clean classrooms and corridors. They work tirelessly behind the scenes while remaining almost entirely invisible. Hermione sees exploitation in that invisibility. The fact that students enjoy enormous feasts without knowing who prepared them only strengthens her conviction. To her, the arrangement resembles a social system designed to conceal labor from those benefiting most from it. Yet the elves themselves refuse to cooperate with her vision. One of Hermione's most famous efforts involves knitting hats and hiding them throughout Gryffindor Tower. Her plan is simple. If a house elf accidentally picks up a piece of clothing while cleaning, the elf will be freed. Hermione believes she is offering liberation. The reaction she receives is entirely unexpected. The Hogwarts elves become deeply offended. Many refuse to enter Gryffindor Tower at all. They view the hidden garments not as gifts, but as insults. Rather than celebrating Hermione's activism, they avoid the area whenever possible. Only one elf continues cleaning the tower, Dobby. His response highlights the extraordinary nature of his character. Unlike most elves, Dobby enjoys freedom. He works at Hogwarts by choice after Albus Dumbledore offers him employment. Dumbledore even proposes 10 galleons a week and weekends off. Dobby negotiates the arrangement himself, eventually accepting 1 galleon a week and 1 day off each month because he feels the original offer is excessive. The detail is often remembered as humorous, yet it reveals something important. Dobby genuinely values freedom while still choosing meaningful work. He demonstrates that service and liberty are not necessarily opposites. Dumbledore's treatment of Dobby deserves careful attention. Throughout the series, Dumbledore consistently recognizes worth in individuals overlooked by others. He trusts Hagrid when many fear giants. He gives Remus Lupin a position despite widespread prejudice against werewolves. He treats Dobby with respect rather than ownership. The employment arrangement between them is unique in the books. For perhaps the first time, a house elf works under terms resembling mutual agreement rather than inherited obligation. The experiment succeeds because Dobby wants it to succeed. Hermione interprets Dobby as evidence that broader change is possible. The other elves see him differently. To many of them, Dobby appears eccentric, even unsettling. His enthusiasm for wages and clothing makes him an outlier within his own community. The situation places Hermione in a difficult position. Every principle she believes in tells her that freedom should be desirable, yet many of the individuals she seeks to help reject that conclusion. The conflict is not between good intentions and cruelty. It is between competing understandings of what a meaningful life looks like. The books never offer a simple resolution. Rowling repeatedly allows Hermione to be morally sincere without automatically being correct about every detail. This nuance often disappears in discussions of SPEW, but it is central to the storyline. Hermione identifies a real problem. House elves are denied autonomy in ways that would be unacceptable for human beings. At the same time, she initially fails to grasp the depth of elf traditions, values, and attachments. Her campaign exposes an injustice while also revealing the limits of reform imposed from outside a culture. An intriguing comparison emerges when considering other magical beings. Goblins fiercely protect their independence and frequently clash with wizard authorities. Centaurs reject ministry interference and guard their territory in the Forbidden Forest. House elves present a different challenge entirely. Their relationship with wizard society is not defined by separation but by integration. They live within wizard homes. They preserve wizard households. Their identities have developed alongside the families they serve. Untangling that relationship proves far more complicated than passing a new law or founding a student organization. Perhaps the most important achievement of SPEW is not any immediate reform. The movement remains small. Membership barely grows. Many characters laugh at it. Yet Hermione forces a neglected subject into the open. She compels Harry to think about house elves more seriously. She draws attention to Winky's suffering. She highlights Dobby's individuality. Most importantly, she asks questions that wizarding society has avoided for centuries. Once those questions are spoken aloud, they become difficult to forget. And hidden among all those questions lies one story more important than any other. Because while Hermione debates rights and wages in the corridors of Hogwarts, an elderly house elf named Creature carries memories capable of altering the course of wizarding history. Those memories lead back to a forgotten son of the House of Black, a hidden cave by the sea, and a secret that Lord Voldemort never imagined would survive. If Voldemort had understood House Elf magic, would the entire history of the Second Wizarding War have unfolded differently? Few questions reveal his greatest weakness more clearly. Throughout his rise to power, Voldemort studies obscure branches of magic with obsessive dedication. He uncovers the secrets of Horcruxes. He manipulates ancient enchantments. He gathers followers willing to kill and die in his name. Yet again and again he overlooks forms of power he considers beneath him. House elves fall into that category. The consequences of that blindness begin years before Harry Potter ever learns the name of Regulus Black. The story starts sometime between 1979 and 1980, during the final years of the First Wizarding War. Voldemort has already begun creating multiple Horcruxes. One of them is Salazar Slytherin's locket, an object carrying immense symbolic value for a wizard obsessed with his ancestry. To protect the Horcrux, Voldemort chooses a remote seaside cave that he once visited as a child from Wool's orphanage. The location already holds personal significance. He transforms it into a fortress of magical defenses. Hidden entrances, enchanted barriers, a potion-filled basin, and an underground lake filled with inferi combine to create one of the most dangerous places in Britain. To test those protections, Voldemort borrows Creature from the House of Black. The decision seems insignificant at first. Creature is merely a servant in Voldemort's eyes. Regulus Black, still a young Death Eater at the time, obeys when asked to lend his elf. Creature later recounts the events in remarkable detail. He accompanies Voldemort to the cave. He watches the Dark Lord place the locket within the basin. Then Voldemort forces him to drink every drop of the potion protecting it. The liquid inflicts unbearable thirst, confusion, and suffering. Once the test is complete, Voldemort leaves Creature behind to die. Everything about the plan reflects Voldemort's world view. He assumes a house elf's life has no value. He assumes no one will care if the creature disappears. Most importantly, he assumes a house elf trapped within his magical defenses has no means of escape. For many wizards, those assumptions would seem reasonable. The cave is designed to defeat skilled magical intruders. Dumbledore himself later struggles against its protections, yet Voldemort makes a critical mistake. He applies wizard logic to a creature whose magic follows different rules. Creature survives because of an earlier command. Regulus Black had ordered him to return home after assisting the Dark Lord. Bound to obey, creature apparates away from the cave despite obstacles intended to prevent escape. The achievement is extraordinary. He survives the potion. He escapes the inferi-filled lake. He crosses enchantments that Voldemort believed secure. And then he returns to Grimold Place, carrying knowledge capable of destroying the Dark Lord's plans. The moment reveals one of the most important truths in the series. House elf magic does not merely resemble wizard magic. In crucial situations, it bypasses it. When Creature tells Regulus what happened, the young wizard finally understands the nature of Voldemort's secret. Regulus had joined the Death Eaters believing in pure blood ideals. Over time, however, he becomes disillusioned. The treatment of Creature appears to play a major role in that transformation. Voldemort's willingness to sacrifice a loyal servant exposes a level of cruelty Regulus cannot ignore. The revelation forces him to confront the reality behind the movement he once supported. In a war filled with dramatic defections and open rebellion, Regulus's change of heart remains one of the quietest and one of the most consequential. The next chapter unfolds in secrecy. Regulus returns to the cave with Creature. This time they carry a counterfeit locket. Regulus orders Creature to help him retrieve the real Horcrux. He drinks the potion himself. As the effects overwhelm him, he instructs Creature to take the genuine locket, replace it with the fake, and return home. The counterfeit contains a message signed with the initials R.A.B. In it, Regulus declares his intention to oppose Voldemort and expresses hope that one day the Dark Lord will meet his end. Moments later, Regulus is dragged beneath the lake by Inferi and never returns. For years, the significance of his sacrifice remains hidden. Sirius Black believes his younger brother died as a foolish supporter of Voldemort. The Order of the Phoenix knows nothing about the Horcrux mission. The Ministry certainly remains unaware. Even Dumbledore does not discover the truth during his lifetime. The secret survives only because Creature remembers. A house elf becomes the sole living witness to one of the most important acts of resistance in the entire war. Without him, Regulus Black's redemption would vanish from history. This detail transforms the way we view Creature. When Harry first inherits him after Sirius's death in 1996, the elf appears hostile, prejudiced, and difficult to trust. He mutters insults. He clings to old pureblood loyalties. He assists Narcissa Malfoy and Bellatrix Lestrange by exploiting loopholes in Sirius's commands. Yet beneath that bitterness lies a being carrying decades of grief. Creature loved Regulus. He obeyed Regulus's final orders. He preserved the memory of a master who treated him with a degree of respect absent elsewhere in his life. His behavior begins to make more sense once those memories come into view. The transformation of Creature during Deathly Hallows becomes one of the series' most understated emotional arcs. After Harry listens to his story rather than dismissing him, something changes. Harry gives him Regulus's fake locket. He speaks with kindness. He acknowledges the sacrifice that both Regulus and Creature made. The response is immediate and profound. For perhaps the first time in years, Creature feels understood. The angry, suspicious elf gradually becomes loyal to Harry, not through coercion, but through respect. The contrast with Voldemort's approach could not be sharper. Dumbledore often insists that choices matter more than abilities. The tale of Regulus and Creature illustrates that principle beautifully. Voldemort possesses immense magical power. Regulus possesses far less. Yet Regulus chooses compassion where Voldemort chooses exploitation. He sees value in a house elf's life. He listens to Creature's experience. That single difference sets events in motion that eventually contribute to Voldemort's downfall. The Dark Lord's failure is not merely magical, it is moral. He cannot imagine loyalty freely given because he understands only obedience enforced through fear. And so one of the greatest secrets in wizarding history survives not within the ministry, not within Hogwarts, and not within the mind of a famous wizard. It survives inside the memory of an aging house elf standing alone in an old London townhouse. The revelation changes Harry's understanding of Creature forever. Soon, it will change something else as well, because when the final battle comes to Hogwarts, the forgotten servants of the wizarding world will step out of the shadows, and history will finally see what they are capable of. Did the Battle of Hogwarts reveal that house elves were never truly powerless at all? By the spring of 1998, the wizarding world stands on the edge of catastrophe. Voldemort controls the Ministry of Magic. Death Eaters hold positions of authority throughout Britain. Hogwarts itself has become a harsher place under the leadership of Severus Snape, the Carrows, and the regime imposed by the Dark Lord's followers. Yet beneath the castle, in the kitchens where generations of elves have quietly worked, life continues much as it always has. Fires burn, meals are prepared, dishes are cleaned. Few people realize that these unseen workers are about to become participants in one of the most important battles in magical history. The conflict begins when Harry, Ron, and Hermione return to Hogwarts searching for Rowena Ravenclaw's lost diadem. The castle quickly transforms into a fortress. Members of the Order of the Phoenix arrive. Professors organize defenses. Students of age prepare to fight. Minerva McGonagall animates suits of armor and commands enchanted statues to defend the school. Protective spells spread across the grounds. The atmosphere becomes charged with anticipation. Every corridor carries the feeling that centuries of history are holding their breath. Amid the preparations, an important scene unfolds in the Room of Requirement. Neville Longbottom has spent months leading resistance efforts against the Carrows. Students have hidden there, recovered there, and planned acts of defiance there. The room becomes a symbol of collective courage. Yet even in these moments, house elves remain largely absent from most conversations about the coming battle. The defenders focus on wizards, witches, giants, spiders, and Death Eaters. Old assumptions persist. The elves are still seen primarily as servants. Then Harry encounters something that changes the tone entirely. While searching for the diadem, Harry realizes that Hogwarts contains many beings who could be caught in the fighting. One of his immediate concerns is the safety of the house elves working in the kitchens. The detail is easy to overlook amid the urgency of the battle, but it matters deeply. Harry insists that the elves should be evacuated. He remembers Dobby. He remembers the sacrifices house elves have made. He refuses to treat them as expendable. It is a small moment of consideration, yet it reflects everything he has learned over the years. The reaction comes from an unexpected source. When the subject arises, a creature steps forward. The same elf who once muttered insults beneath its breath now stands transformed by loyalty and purpose. Years of bitterness have not disappeared, but they have been joined by something stronger. Creature has found meaning again through the memory of Regulus Black and through Harry's respect. For the first time, the elderly elf is not merely preserving the past. He is helping shape the future. What follows is one of the most remarkable images in the entire series. As the battle reaches its height, the Hogwarts house elves emerge from the kitchens. Led by Creature, they charge into the conflict, carrying kitchen knives, meat cleavers, carving tools, and other implements seized from their workplace. They do not arrive reluctantly. They do not fight because they have been ordered to do so. They choose to enter the struggle. Their battle cry echoes through the castle as they advance in the name of Regulus Black. The moment transforms everything readers thought they understood about the role of house elves. The symbolism runs deep. For centuries, these beings have been associated with kitchens, cleaning, and service. The very tools used to prepare meals now become weapons against Voldemort's forces. The same hands that polished silver and stirred soup seize knives and charge into battle. Rowling does not present the elves as comic relief. They are defenders of Hogwarts. They are participants in the war. The image forces both characters and readers to reevaluate long-standing assumptions about weakness and strength. Creature's presence at the front of this charge carries particular weight. Years earlier, Voldemort regarded him as disposable. Sirius often struggled to see beyond his irritating behavior. Many members of the Order viewed him with suspicion. Yet now Creature stands as a leader. His devotion to Regulus, once dismissed as an eccentric fixation, becomes a source of inspiration. The memory of a forgotten hero helps rally an entire group of house elves into action. In a story filled with famous wizards and legendary duels, one of the most moving acts of leadership comes from an elderly servant. The Battle of Hogwarts contains many celebrated moments. Molly Weasley defeats Bellatrix Lestrange. Neville Longbottom destroys Nagini with the sword of Gryffindor. Harry ultimately confronts Voldemort in the Great Hall. These scenes naturally attract attention, yet the participation of the House Elves deserves equal consideration because it reveals something fundamental about the nature of courage. The elves do not possess political power, they do not command armies, they do not appear in ministry records as influential figures. Nevertheless, when their home is threatened, they choose to stand and fight. There is also a subtle contrast with earlier generations of wizarding society. For centuries, many pureblood families treated house elves as property. Their labor was expected. Their loyalty was assumed. During the battle, however, loyalty becomes voluntary. No master compels the Hogwarts elves to defend the castle. Their actions emerge from attachment, gratitude, and community. The distinction matters enormously. Service imposed by force and service offered freely are not the same thing. The elves demonstrate that difference through action rather than words. The battle ultimately ends with Voldemort's defeat. Dawn begins to approach. Survivors gather among damaged walls and shattered stone. The castle bears scars that will take years to repair. Yet Hogwarts still stands. Among the many groups who contributed to that survival are the House Elves, whose role often receives less attention than it deserves. For one brief moment, the invisible workers beneath the castle step into the light of history. Their courage becomes impossible to deny. And once the dust begins to settle, a larger question remains. What exactly have House Elves represented throughout this 1,000-year story? Are they symbols of oppression, loyalty, tradition, forgotten magic, cultural identity, or something that resists every simple definition? To answer that, we must step back from individual battles and look at the long arc of their history, from Dobby's first sock to the uncertain future waiting beyond the war. What were House Elves really meant to represent all along? After 7 novels, countless magical creatures, 2 wizarding wars, and hundreds of years of fictional history, the question remains surprisingly difficult to answer. House Elves occupy a unique place in Rowling's world. They are neither fully separated from wizard society nor fully integrated into it. They live inside wizard homes, preserve wizard traditions, and shape wizard history. Yet they often remain unseen by the very people who depend upon them. By the end of the series, the mystery surrounding their origins remains unsolved, but the meaning of their story becomes clearer. The final years of Dobby's life provide one of the strongest clues. After gaining freedom in 1993, Dobby does not withdraw from the wizarding world. He does not disappear to build an independent community far from human influence. Instead, he chooses connection. He accepts work at Hogwarts. He helps Harry repeatedly. During the Triwizard Tournament, he provides information about the gillyweed that allows Harry to survive the second task in the Black Lake. He warns Harry about danger whenever he can. Again and again, his choices are guided not by obligation, but by affection. That distinction reaches its most powerful expression in March of 1998. When Harry and his friends are imprisoned at Malfoy Manor, Dobby answers Aberforth Dumbledore's request for help and apparates into the house. The rescue succeeds, but not without cost. Bellatrix Lestrange throws a silver dagger as the prisoners escape. The blade strikes Dobby during the apparition. Moments later, on the shore near Shell Cottage, Harry realizes that the elf has been fatally wounded. The scene unfolds quietly. No grand speeches, no triumphant music, just a free elf dying after saving the lives of others. Harry's response is significant. Rather than using magic, he digs Dobby's grave by hand. Beside the cottage belonging to Bill and Fleur Weasley, he works through the night with a shovel. Above the grave, he places a simple inscription: "Here lies Dobby, a free elf." Among all the monuments and memorials scattered throughout the wizarding world, few feel more personal. The wording does not celebrate magical power. It does not mention heroism. It honors freedom. The phrase captures the thing Dobby valued most, the thing he spent his life pursuing. Yet Dobby's story is only one path. Creature's path leads somewhere very different. Unlike Dobby, he never seeks freedom. His transformation emerges through respect, recognition, and belonging. During Deathly Hallows, after Harry listens to Creature's memories and treats him kindly, the elf changes dramatically. He begins preparing meals for Harry, Ron, and Hermione at Grimmauld Place. He takes pride in caring for them. His loyalty becomes genuine rather than resentful. The change is not produced by liberation from service. It is produced by dignity within service. This contrast is crucial because it prevents the story from collapsing into a simple moral lesson. Dobby and Creature are both presented sympathetically. Neither is portrayed as wrong for wanting different things. One treasures freedom above all else. The other finds meaning through connection to a household and its history. Their experiences suggest that house elves cannot be understood through a single model. Individuality matters, choice matters. The series repeatedly returns to that theme across many different characters, and house elves are no exception. The future of elf rights after the Battle of Hogwarts remains largely unwritten. Rowling never provides a detailed account of legislative reforms. The Ministry's post-war policies toward house elves are left unclear. Hermione Granger eventually joins the Ministry and rises through its ranks, ultimately becoming Minister for Magic many years later. Many readers assume she continued advocating for magical creatures, including house elves. That assumption fits naturally with her character, though the books themselves do not describe every step. The uncertainty leaves room for imagination while preserving the reality that social change often unfolds gradually rather than overnight. The unanswered questions extend even further back. Where did house elves originate? Were they once an independent magical civilization? Did ancient magical contracts bind them to wizard households? Were their traditions shaped by culture, enchantment, or both? Canon offers no definitive solution. Rowling deliberately leaves the earliest chapters of their history obscured. The silence invites curiosity. It encourages readers to think about what has been forgotten, omitted, or taken for granted within the wizarding world itself. A popular fan theory suggests that house elves may have entered into magical service willingly in a distant age, forming reciprocal bonds with wizard families that slowly changed over centuries. Another theory proposes that ancient forms of magic altered their society so thoroughly that service became inseparable from identity. These ideas remain speculative. What matters is not whether any particular theory proves correct. What matters is the fact that readers continue searching for answers. The mystery persists because the evidence refuses to fit neatly into one explanation. Looking back across the entire history we have explored, a pattern emerges. House elves repeatedly influence events far beyond their apparent status. Dobby protects Harry before the Chamber of Secrets opens. Winky helps conceal one of the wizarding world's most dangerous secrets. Creature preserves the truth about Regulus Black and the Locket Horcrux. The Hogwarts elves help defend the castle during its darkest hour. Their actions alter the course of history, yet they rarely receive recognition equal to their impact. Again and again, the smallest figures stand at the turning points of the largest events. Perhaps that is why the opening image remains so powerful. Long after the Great Hall empties, after the candles burn low and the portraits drift to sleep, the kitchens beneath Hogwarts remain alive with quiet work. Generations of students celebrate victories, fear examinations, fall in love, and leave the castle behind. Headmasters come and go. Ministers rise and fall. Dark lords emerge and are defeated. Through it all, unseen hands continue setting tables, tending fires, and preserving traditions older than memory. And so, as the last embers glow softly beneath the castle stones, you can return to that silent kitchen where our journey began. The silver trays are polished, the ovens are cooling. Somewhere in the darkness, an elf finishes a final task before dawn. History often remembers the powerful, the famous, and the victorious. Yet the hidden story of House Elves suggests something different. Sometimes the people who shape a world most deeply are the ones standing quietly behind it, carrying its memories long after everyone else has forgotten. When you look closely at the story of House Elves, it becomes clear that it is not really a story about servants. It is a story about the limits of power. Throughout the wizarding world, the people who believe themselves strongest are often the people who understand the least. Lucius Malfoy possesses wealth, influence, and an ancient family name, yet he never truly sees Dobby. Bartemius Crouch controls ministries and international cooperation, yet he fails to understand the depth of Winky's devotion until it is too late. Voldemort pursues mastery over death itself, yet he overlooks the magic of House Elves so completely that one of his greatest secrets survives because of it. Again and again, the series suggests that power creates blindness when it convinces a person that certain lives are too small to matter. What makes the House Elves so fascinating is that they challenge the ordinary shape of heroism. Harry defeats Voldemort. Dumbledore uncovers hidden truths. Hermione fights for justice. These are visible acts. They occupy the center of the stage. House Elves operate differently. Their influence accumulates quietly through years of loyalty, memory, labor, and care. Dobby changes the course of events because he loves freely. Creature changes because someone finally listens to him. Winky reveals how deeply a heart can be wounded when belonging is taken away. None of these stories are built around glory. They are built around relationships. There is also something deeply characteristic of Rowling's world in the way these stories unfold. Magic alone is never enough. The Elder Wand cannot create friendship. Horcruxes cannot manufacture loyalty. Ministry authority cannot command genuine affection. The forces that ultimately shape history are often emotional rather than magical. A mother's sacrifice protects Harry. Snape's love guides his choices for decades. Regulus Black turns against Voldemort because cruelty toward Creature reveals a truth he can no longer ignore. The wizarding world appears to revolve around spells and enchantments, yet its deepest machinery is almost always human feeling. That is why the question of freedom remains so complicated throughout the story. House Elves refuse to fit comfortably into a simple moral lesson. Dobby's freedom becomes a source of joy. Winky's freedom becomes a source of grief. Creature discovers dignity, not through liberation, but through respect. The series never asks you to choose one answer and discard the others. Instead, it asks you to recognize that lives are complicated, cultures are complicated, and people often want different things, even when outsiders believe they know what's best. There is wisdom in that uncertainty. The refusal to simplify is what gives the House Elf story its unusual weight. Perhaps that is also why their origins remain unknown. If Rowling had provided a complete history, a neat beginning and a neat explanation, some of the mystery would disappear. Instead, the elves stand in the story the way many forgotten groups stand in real history. Their labor is visible, their influence is undeniable. Yet much of their past has been lost beneath the records of kings, ministers, generals, and famous names. The absence becomes part of the meaning. You are left looking into a silence that feels older than any surviving document. And so, as the castle settles once more into stillness, you find yourself returning to the place where this journey began. The great hall is empty. Moonlight touches the high windows. Beneath the stone floors, deep below the sleeping students and silent portraits, a kitchen fire glows softly in the darkness. Copper pots hang motionless above fading embers. A silver serving tray catches the last flicker of orange light. Somewhere nearby, unseen hands complete one final task before the dawn, and the 1,000-year story of the house elves continues quietly through the night.